The alarm systems across Earth Defense Command screamed to life at exactly 3 in the morning. Commander Jake Morrison ran down the metal corridor, still pulling on his uniform jacket as emergency lights flashed red against the walls. In his 15 years of service, he had never seen every system activate at once. Something was coming, and it was big. The main control room buzzed with activity. Dozens of officers stared at their screens, their faces pale in the blue light. Jake pushed through to the center display where Admiral Harris stood like a statue, his eyes fixed on the massive object appearing on their sensors. "Report," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Unknown vessel, sir. It appeared out of nowhere about 10 minutes ago. It's just sitting there beyond the moon, making no hostile moves." The young officer's hands shook as she pointed at the screen. "Sir, it's bigger than anything we've ever built. 3 times the size of our largest carrier." Jake studied the shape on the screen. It didn't look like any Earth ship. The design was strange, with too many angles and curves that made no sense for space travel. At least not for human space travel. "Send a standard greeting on all frequencies," Jake ordered. "Let's see if they want to talk." The response came faster than anyone expected. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something not human. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on its face, and its skin looked like polished green stone. When it spoke, the words were translated by their computer system into perfect English. "I am Ambassador Krell of the Galactic Coalition. We come seeking alliance with the people of Earth. Your world is in grave danger." Jake felt his stomach drop. The words every military commander dreaded hearing. He straightened his shoulders and stepped forward. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of Earth Defense Command." "What kind of danger?" Krell's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that looked almost sad. "The Devourers. They are coming to your system, and they will consume everything. Every world they touch becomes lifeless rock. We have been fighting them for 300 of your years, and we are losing." The control room went silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "How long do we have?" 20 of your years, perhaps less. The Devourers move slowly, but they never stop. They have already destroyed 16 species completely. 47 others stand with us in the coalition, fighting to survive." Krell leaned closer to whatever camera was transmitting his image. "Alone, Earth will fall in days. With us, you might live to see your grandchildren grow old." Jake looked around the room at his people. Young men and women who had signed up to defend Earth from human threats, not alien monsters. But he could see in their faces the same determination he felt. They would not go quietly into the dark. "Give us 48 hours to consult with our leaders," Jake said. "Then we'll give you our answer." The next 2 days were chaos. Every government on Earth argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others wanted to fight alone, refusing to trust aliens. But the evidence Krell provided was impossible to ignore. Satellite footage of dead worlds, their surfaces stripped clean. Recordings of final transmissions from dying species, begging for help that never came. In the end, Earth voted to join the coalition. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would go to war. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the EDF Valor, watching through the main window as her ship prepared to leave Earth orbit for the last time. She was 42 years old, a veteran of 3 colonial conflicts, and she had never been more afraid in her life. Behind her, the Valor's crew of 200 worked at their stations, pretending not to be terrified. "All systems ready, Captain," her first officer reported. Lieutenant Ben Carter was young, barely 30, but he knew the Valor's engines better than anyone alive. "We can jump to the coalition rally point on your command." Lisa took a deep breath. Below them, Earth turned slowly, blue and green and beautiful. Somewhere down there, her sister was watching, probably crying. Lisa had promised to come back. She intended to keep that promise. "Take us out, Lieutenant. Let's go meet our new friends." The jump to the rally point took 6 hours. When they arrived, Lisa understood for the first time how small humanity really was. The coalition fleet stretched as far as her sensors could detect. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species, all gathered in a formation that looked like a small galaxy. The Valor was assigned to the 7th Fleet under Coalition Commander Vax, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish filled with lights. Vax spoke through a translation device, his voice sounding like wind chimes. "Welcome, humans. You will take position in the rear guard. Your ships are primitive, so we cannot risk you in direct combat. You will provide support fire and rescue operations only." Lisa felt anger flash through her chest, but she kept her voice level. "With respect, Commander." My crew and I didn't come here to hide in the back. We can fight. You are untested, Vax replied. His lights flickered in what might have been dismissal. The Devourers have destroyed species far more advanced than yours. We cannot afford losses from pride. Over the next 3 weeks, Lisa learned that most coalition species thought the same way. They had been fighting so long that they had forgotten how to do anything but retreat slowly. Their tactics were all about minimizing losses, preserving ships, falling back to prepared positions. To them, every battle was about survival, not victory. The humans didn't see it that way. The first real test came at the Kronos belt, an asteroid field on the edge of Coalition space. Devourer scouts had been spotted, and the 7th Fleet moved to intercept. Lisa watched from the Valor's bridge as Vax arranged his ships in a defensive sphere, planning to let the enemy come to them. Captain, we're detecting movement in the asteroids, Ben reported. 16 contacts moving fast. The Devourers came like nightmares made real. They weren't ships in the traditional sense. They were creatures, each one the size of a fighter craft, their bodies made of something that looked like liquid metal. They moved through space without engines, somehow propelling themselves through vacuum. The Coalition fleet opened fire at maximum range, their energy weapons lighting up the darkness. The Devourers dodged and weaved, their bodies flowing around the blasts. They were fast, impossibly fast. They're breaking through the perimeter, someone shouted. Lisa made her decision in a heartbeat. All power to engines. Ben, give me everything she's got. We're going in. Captain, Commander Vax ordered us to hold position. I don't take orders that get people killed. Move. The Valor shot forward, breaking formation and racing toward the gap in the Coalition line. The Devourers had reached a damaged science vessel, their metal bodies tearing through the hull like paper. Lisa could see escape pods launching, tiny lights in the darkness. Target those things with everything we have. Don't let them reach those pods, the Valor's weapons blazed. Missiles streaked across space, followed by laser fire and railgun rounds. The humans didn't aim carefully and conserve ammunition like the Coalition. They fired everything, filling space with deadly metal and energy. 2 Devourers exploded, their bodies rupturing in silent flashes. The others turned toward the Valor, recognizing a threat. They came fast, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. Evasive maneuvers. Don't let them touch the hull. Ben sent the Valor spinning and diving, the ship's artificial gravity working overtime to keep everyone from being thrown around. The Devourers followed, their appendages reaching out, trying to grab hold. One managed to land on the Valor's port side. Lisa watched on the external cameras as it began tearing through the armor plating. Alarms screamed warnings about hull breaches. Vent that section, Lisa ordered. Blow the atmosphere. The emergency vents opened, and the sudden explosive decompression threw the Devourer off the ship. It tumbled away into space, and 3 missiles found it before it could recover. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 14 Devourers were destroyed. 2 escaped. The Coalition had lost the science vessel but saved all 140 crew members. Commander Vax called Lisa to his flagship immediately. She expected punishment for breaking formation. Instead, the glowing jellyfish regarded her with what might have been respect. Your tactics are reckless, Vax said, but effective. Perhaps humans have something to teach us after all. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. We're stubborn, Commander, and we don't leave people behind. If that's what it takes to win this war, then that's what we'll do. That night, as the Valor limped back to base for repairs, Lisa sat in her quarters and recorded a message to her sister. She didn't know if it would ever reach Earth, but she had to try. We fought today, she said to the camera, and we won. It wasn't pretty and we got lucky, but we proved something important. We proved that humans belong here, fighting for the galaxy. I'm coming home, sis. Just not yet. There's work to do first. She ended the recording and looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were still coming, but now they knew that humanity was in their way. And humanity did not move for anyone. The medical bay on the Valor smelled like disinfectant and burned metal. Captain Lisa Hayes sat on an examination table while the ship's doctor checked the bruises on her ribs from the Kronos belt battle. 3 weeks had passed since humanity's first real fight with the Devourers, and Lisa still felt every impact from that day. You need to rest more. Captain, Dr. Nina Walsh said, her scanner beeping as it passed over Lisa's torso. You're pushing yourself too hard. Can't rest when there's a war on. Lisa replied, wincing as Nina pressed a particularly sore spot. How's the crew holding up? Better than you are. At least they sleep occasionally. Nina put down her scanner and looked Lisa in the eye. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Before Lisa could argue, her communication device buzzed. Ben Carter's voice came through, sounding excited. Captain, you need to come to the observation deck. There's someone here you should meet. Lisa found Ben standing with an older man who looked completely out of place on a military vessel. He wore civilian clothes, had gray hair that stuck up in odd directions, and carried a worn leather bag that probably belonged in a museum. But his eyes were sharp and intelligent, taking in every detail of the ship around him. Captain Hayes, this is Greg Palmer, Ben said. He's a xenoarchaeologist with the Coalition. He specifically asked to speak with you. Greg extended his hand and Lisa shook it. His grip was stronger than she expected. Thank you for seeing me, Captain. I know you're busy, but I've been following your career with the Coalition. What you did at Kronos Belt was remarkable. We did what we had to do, Lisa said carefully. She had learned to be cautious around civilians. They often had agendas. What brings an archaeologist to a warship? Greg's face lit up like a child with a secret. I want to tell you about the Black Armada. Lisa glanced at Ben, who shrugged. The what? The Black Armada, Greg repeated, pulling a datapad from his bag. It's a legend among Coalition species, though most of them treat it like a fairy tale now. But I don't think it's a legend at all. I think it's real, and I think it might be the key to winning this war. He activated the datapad and a holographic image appeared above it. The image showed a massive fleet of ships, each one black as space itself, arranged in perfect formation. There were thousands of them, from small fighters to enormous vessels that dwarfed anything Lisa had ever seen. 12,000 years ago, there was a species called the Ancients. We don't know what they looked like or where they came from. All we know is that they were the most advanced civilization the galaxy has ever known. And this was their fleet. Greg zoomed in on one of the larger ships. The Black Armada appeared during something called the First Galactic Convergence, a war that almost destroyed all sentient life. The Ancients and their armada ended the war in a matter of weeks. Lisa studied the image. The ships were beautiful in a frightening way, their design suggesting both elegance and overwhelming power. What happened to them? That's the mystery. The Ancients won the war, then vanished. Completely. They left behind sealed installations on dozens of worlds protected by warnings in languages we can barely translate. The Coalition has found 19 of these installations over the centuries. No one has ever managed to open one. Greg looked directly at Lisa, but I think I know why. I'm listening, Lisa said, her interest growing despite her skepticism. Greg pulled up more data on his pad. Every installation has the same warning, carved in stone or metal or sometimes materials we can't identify. For years, we translated it as keep out or danger or various other warnings, but I've been studying ancient languages my entire adult life and I think we've been wrong. The word isn't a warning, it's an instruction. It means wait. Wait for what? Ben asked. For the right species. The inheritors. Greg's hands moved excitedly as he spoke. The Ancients didn't disappear. They transcended somehow, evolved beyond physical form or traveled to another dimension. We may never know. But before they left, they prepared for the future. They left their technology behind for whoever came after them. For whoever was worthy. Lisa crossed her arms. And you think humans might be these inheritors? We've been in space for less than 2 centuries. There are species in the Coalition who have been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Exactly, Greg said, his excitement undiminished. Don't you see? The Ancients wouldn't leave their legacy to species who were already old and set in their ways. They would leave it to someone new, someone who still had the capacity to grow and change, someone who hadn't been worn down by centuries of war. The words hung in the air. Lisa wanted to dismiss them as fantasy, but something in Greg's absolute certainty made her pause. Even if you're right, how would we find this armada? The galaxy is a big place. Greg's smile widened. That's why I'm here, Captain. Because 3 days ago, Coalition forces discovered something on a planet called Tarsus Prime. Tarsus Prime was dying. That was the first thing Colonel Amy Wright noticed as her transport ship descended through the planet's atmosphere. The sky was the wrong color, tinted red from the fires burning across 2 continents. The Devourers had reached the planet a week earlier, and the evacuation was going badly. Amy commanded the ground forces tasked with holding the northern evacuation zones. It was a job no one wanted because everyone knew what it meant. They would be the last ones off the planet, if they got off at all. The transport landed hard on a makeshift runway outside the city of New Harmony. Amy grabbed her rifle and led her squad of 20 soldiers down the ramp into chaos. Civilians ran in every direction carrying children and belongings. Coalition ships lifted off constantly, packed beyond capacity with refugees. "Sergeant Kelly, get these people organized into lines," Amy shouted over the noise. "Priority to children and elderly. Everyone else waits their turn." Sergeant Dan Kelly was a big man with a bigger heart, perfect for calming panicked crowds. He started directing people with a voice like thunder and a gentle hand on shoulders. Amy left him to it and headed for the command tent. Inside, she found a nightmare of bad news. The coalition commander, a reptilian being named Sorth, looked exhausted. "Colonel Wright, thank the stars you're here. The Devourers are moving faster than we predicted. They'll reach the northern zones in 48 hours, maybe less. How many people still need evacuation?" 17,000 in this zone alone. We have ships for maybe 10,000. Amy felt her jaw clench. Then we need more ships or more time. There are no more ships, and time is not something we can manufacture. Sorth pulled up a map on his display. There is one possibility. Our sensors detected unusual energy readings beneath the ice cap, about 50 miles north of here. It might be a natural phenomenon or it might be an ancient installation. Amy's head snapped up. Ancient? You mean like the sealed sites the Coalition has been afraid to touch for centuries? Yes, but circumstances are desperate. If there is anything there that could help us, we must try. I am asking you to take a team and investigate. The journey north took 6 hours in an armored transport. Amy brought her best people, Kelly, 2 engineers named Sophie Grant and Luis Mendez, and 4 soldiers for security. They traveled across ice fields that stretched to the horizon, following the energy readings deeper into the frozen wasteland. They found the installation at sunset. It rose from the ice like a mountain, except mountains didn't have perfect geometric shapes or surfaces that reflected no light. The structure was black, the same absolute black Amy had seen in old photographs of space. "That's not natural," Sophie said, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "That's not natural at all." Luis checked his instruments. "Energy readings are off the scale. Whatever this thing is, it's still powered after who knows how many thousands of years." They approached carefully, weapons ready even though there was no sign of danger. The structure had no obvious entrance, just smooth walls that rose 30 meters into the air. Amy walked along the base, searching for anything that looked like a door. She found it by accident. Her gloved hand touched the wall and suddenly the entire section lit up with symbols that flowed like water. The symbols were beautiful and completely alien, but somehow Amy could almost understand them. They seemed to be asking a question. "What's happening?" Kelly had his rifle up, pointing at the glowing wall. "I don't know. I just touched it and—" Amy trailed off as the symbols rearranged themselves into something that looked almost like English letters. Not quite right, but close enough to read. It says Inheritor. The wall split open, revealing a corridor that led down into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on automatically, showing a path descending into the ice. Amy looked at her team, saw her own fear and excitement reflected in their faces. "Sophie, Luis, you're with me. Kelly, you and the others secure the entrance. If we're not back in 2 hours, report everything to command." The corridor led them down for what felt like forever. The walls were smooth and warm to the touch despite the ice above them. Every 20 meters, symbols appeared on the walls, always the same word, Inheritor. They emerged into a chamber so large that their lights couldn't reach the far walls. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal with a holographic display floating above it. The display showed a map of the galaxy with the Valor left Coalition space in the middle of the night cycle, when most of the fleet was asleep and sensor watches were at their lightest. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge, watching as 5 other human ships fell into formation behind her. Together they were small fleet, barely enough to defend themselves if they ran into trouble. But they were all Earth Command could spare without raising Coalition suspicions. "Jump coordinates locked in," Lieutenant Ben Carter reported from the engineering station. His fingers moved across his console with practiced ease. "First jump will take us to the edge of charted space. After that, we're in unknown territory." Lisa nodded. "All ships, this is the Valor. Maintain radio silence unless absolutely necessary. We don't know who might be listening. Jump on my mark. She paused, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. Mark. The stars stretched and twisted as the Valor entered jump space. For 30 seconds, reality bent in ways that made Lisa's stomach turn even after years of space travel. Then they emerged into normal space, and the view outside the windows had changed completely. Jump successful, Ben announced. All ships reporting green across the board. Greg Palmer stood next to Lisa's command chair, his eyes wide as he stared at the sensor displays. The old archaeologist looked like he hadn't slept since they left, his gray hair even more disheveled than usual. According to the ancient coordinates, epsilon 9 is 3 weeks away at our current speed. But Captain, look at this. He pulled up a navigation chart on the main display. The route the ancients had provided didn't follow any known jump routes. Instead, it threaded through regions of space that Coalition maps marked as unstable or dangerous. Those areas are marked dangerous for a reason, Lisa said. Unstable gravity wells, radiation storms, regions where jump drives malfunction. Or regions that the ancients wanted to keep people away from, Greg countered. His excitement was barely contained. Think about it. If you wanted to hide something for thousands of years, you'd put it somewhere no one would look, somewhere everyone was afraid to go. Lisa considered this. It made a certain kind of sense. Ben, can the Valor handle those jump points? Maybe, Ben said slowly. But I wouldn't bet my life on it. These paths haven't been used in recorded history. There could be spatial distortions we can't detect until we're in them. Then we'll be careful, Lisa decided. Plot the course. If the ancients used these routes, then they're passable. We just need to trust their navigation. The first week of travel was tense but uneventful. They jumped through 3 systems that made their sensors scream warnings. But the ancient coordinates proved accurate. Each jump took them further from Coalition space and deeper into the unknown. On the 8th day, they found the first derelict. Captain, we're detecting a massive object ahead, Ben called out. It's not on any charts. Dimensions are... Captain, this thing is huge. Its reading is over 15 kilometers long. Lisa leaned forward in her chair. Put it on screen. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge fall silent. It was a ship, but calling it a ship seemed inadequate. It floated dead in space, its hull black as the void itself. The design was unlike anything human or Coalition, all sharp angles and curved surfaces that seemed to flow into each other. Even dead and cold, it radiated a sense of terrible power. It matches the designs from the legends, Greg whispered, his voice filled with awe. That's an ancient warship. A real one. Life signs? Lisa asked. None. The ship is completely dead. No power, no atmosphere, nothing. It's been here a very long time. Ben pulled up more scans. But Captain, the hull is intact. Whatever killed this ship, it didn't leave a mark. Lisa made a decision. Send a team over. I want to know what we're dealing with before we reach Epsilon 9. Lieutenant Sophie Grant led the boarding party, the same engineer who had helped Colonel Wright explore the installation on Tarsus Prime. She took 3 soldiers and enough scanning equipment to fill a shuttle. Lisa watched from the Valor's bridge as the small craft crossed the empty space between ships. We're approaching the hull now, Sophie's voice came through the radio. Looking for an airlock or entry point. A pause. Found something. It looks like a docking port. Attempting to interface with it. Minutes passed in silence. Then Sophie's voice returned, tinged with excitement. The port is opening. I don't know how, but it recognized our docking clamps. We're going in. For 2 hours, Lisa listened to Sophie's team explore the ancient ship. They found vast corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. They found chambers filled with equipment that still hummed with residual power after millennia. They found weapon systems that made Sophie's voice shake when she described them. Captain, these aren't just advanced weapons. They're reality-bending weapons. One of these guns has a power core that could level a continent. And this ship has hundreds of them. Sophie paused. There's something else. I found what looks like the bridge. There's a symbol here displayed on every screen. It's the same symbol from the Tarsus Prime installation. What symbol? Lisa asked. A black star surrounded by 7 rings. I think it's their fleet insignia. The mark of the Black Armada. Greg was practically bouncing with excitement. They're leading us there. Don't you see? These derelicts are like breadcrumbs showing us the way. The ancients wanted whoever followed their coordinates to understand what they're offering. Over the next 10 days, they found 6 more derelict ships. Each one was different in size and design, but all bore the same black star symbol. Some were small, barely larger than human fighters. Others were massive dreadnoughts that could have held the entire Valor in their cargo bays. All of them were empty, their crews long gone, waiting in the darkness like monuments to a civilization that had transcended the need for war. On day 19, they entered a region of space where the stars looked wrong. They were dimmer here, their light somehow muted. Ben's instruments went haywire, showing readings that made no scientific sense. "Captain, I don't know how to explain this, but local space-time is bent. It's like something massive is warping reality itself." Ben looked up from his console, his face pale. "We're close. Whatever's at epsilon 9, it's big enough to affect space for light years in every direction." The final jump brought them to their destination, and the view took Lisa's breath away. Epsilon 9 wasn't a normal star system. There was no sun, no planets orbiting a central point. Instead, at the heart of the system was a sphere, an artificial sphere so large it could have contained Earth's sun 100 times over. The sphere was black, covered in the same light-absorbing material as the derelict ships. And it was active. Energy readings poured off the structure, more power than entire civilizations could generate. "It's a Dyson sphere," Greg said, his voice barely audible. "The ancients built a shell around a singularity and used its energy to power." "All of this, all of what?" Lisa asked. Greg pointed at the sensor display. Around the Dyson sphere, arranged in perfect formations, were ships. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. From tiny fighters to massive carriers that dwarfed coalition dreadnoughts. They hung motionless in space, dark and silent, waiting. "The Black Armada," Greg whispered. "We found it. It's real. It's all real." Lisa felt her hands shaking and forced them to be still. She had hoped, even believed, but seeing proof was different. This was power beyond imagination, technology beyond human comprehension, all waiting in the dark. And according to the ancients, it was meant for humanity. "Take us in slowly," Lisa ordered. "Ben, scan everything. I want to know what we're dealing with before we touch anything." They approached the Dyson sphere carefully, the Valor leading and the other 5 ships following in tight formation. As they drew closer, sections of the sphere lit up, glowing with soft blue light. Symbols appeared on its surface, the same ancient language they had seen on Tarsus Prime. "It's welcoming us," Greg said, reading the symbols. It says, "Welcome, inheritors. The wait is over." They found a docking port large enough to accept all 6 human ships. The port opened as they approached, revealing a vast hangar that extended deep into the sphere's interior. Landing lights activated automatically, guiding them to designated spots. As soon as the Valor touched down, Lisa organized landing parties. She wasn't going to explore an ancient installation with just a few people this time. She brought 50 soldiers, a dozen engineers, and every scientist they had. This was too important to take chances. The hangar was pristine, as if it had been built yesterday instead of thousands of years ago. Their footsteps echoed in the massive space as they spread out to explore. Corridors led in every direction, each one marked with symbols that seemed to rearrange themselves into almost English as humans approached. Ben found the first fighter. It sat in what looked like a maintenance bay, sleek and deadly, its black hull reflecting no light. He approached it carefully, his scanner in hand. "Captain, you should see this," he called out. Lisa joined him, along with Greg and Sophie. They stood in front of the fighter, and Lisa reached out to touch its surface. It was warm, like living skin instead of metal. "Try to board it," Greg suggested. The Tarsus installation responded to Colonel Wright. "Maybe the ships will respond to you." Ben found what looked like an access hatch and touched it. The hatch! The alarms throughout the Dyson sphere screamed in a language no human had heard for 12,000 years. But everyone understood what they meant. Danger, enemy, battle. Captain Lisa Hayes stood in the command center of the ancient dreadnought, her hands gripping the railing as she watched the sensor displays fill with red contacts. The Devourer fleet continued to pour into the Epsilon 9 system, ship after ship appearing from jump space like a plague of metal locusts. Current count is 240 enemy vessels, Lieutenant Ben Carter reported from the engineering station. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the fear in his eyes. "They're forming a sphere formation around our position. Standard Devourer encirclement tactics. How long until they're in weapons range?" Lisa asked. 30 minutes at their current speed. 30 minutes. Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. They had come here looking for weapons to fight the Devourers, and now they would get their chance sooner than anyone expected. The question was whether they could learn to use those weapons fast enough to survive. "Get on the radio," Lisa ordered. "I want every human in this sphere to hear this. Everyone who can fly, everyone who knows which end of a gun to point at the enemy. I need them in an ancient ship right now. We don't have time for training. We don't have time for fear. We're going to fight with what we've got and hope it's enough." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as orders flew across every channel. Throughout the massive Dyson sphere, humans ran for the waiting ships. Some had never piloted anything more complex than a shuttle. Others were experienced combat veterans. None of them had any idea what they were doing, but they moved anyway because that's what humans did when faced with impossible odds. Major Kyle Brooks had been a fighter pilot before the Devourers came. He had logged over 3,000 hours in Earth defense fighters, and he considered himself one of the best pilots alive. But as he climbed into the cockpit of an ancient dreadnought, he felt like a child playing with his father's tools. The ship was massive, over 1 kilometer long, with weapon systems that made his hands shake when he touched the controls. The moment he sat in the pilot seat, the ship came alive around him. Displays appeared in his vision, not on screens but directly in his mind. He could see everything, feel everything. The ship's sensors became his senses. Its weapons became his hands. "This is Major Brooks in Dreadnought Position 7, he said into his radio, his voice shaking slightly. "I have control, I think. This thing is responding to my thoughts as much as my hands." "Same here," another pilot reported. "It's like the ship knows what I want before I do." Lisa listened to the reports flooding in. 53 humans had boarded ancient vessels ranging from fighters to cruisers. It wasn't much against 240 Devourer ships, but it was what they had. Greg Palmer appeared at Lisa's side, his gray hair wild and his eyes bright with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Captain, I've been studying the Dyson Sphere systems. This isn't just a staging ground. The sphere itself is a weapon. It can manipulate gravity, create spatial distortions, even affect time in localized areas. The ancients built this as the ultimate defensive position. Can you control it?" Lisa asked. "I think so. The interface is responding to me the same way the ships respond to pilots. But Captain, using these weapons will draw enormous amounts of power. We could destabilize the singularity at the sphere's core. If we don't use them, we die anyway. Do what you can." Greg nodded and moved to a control panel that looked like liquid metal flowing over ancient stone. His hands touched the surface and the entire Dyson sphere began to hum with power. Outside, the Devourer fleet had finished its encirclement. They moved inward slowly, their ships spreading out to cover every possible escape route. Lisa had fought Devourers before and she knew their tactics. They would close in carefully, overwhelming with numbers, giving no chance for escape or counterattack. Except this time, the humans weren't trying to escape. "All ships, this is Captain Hayes, launch when ready. Show them what the Black Armada can do." The ancient ships lifted from the Dyson sphere like dark ghosts rising from a grave. They moved with a grace that made human ships look clumsy, accelerating to impossible speeds without any visible engine thrust. The fighters took point. 50 sleek vessels that darted through space like living things. Behind them came the cruisers and destroyers. And bringing up the rear were the dreadnoughts, massive and terrible and beautiful. Major Kyle Brooks pushed his dreadnought forward, feeling its power thrumming through his mind. The weapon systems appeared in his consciousness like a menu he could read with his thoughts. He selected the main forward cannons and felt them charge, drawing power from the singularity itself through connections he didn't understand but could feel. The Devourers opened fire first. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles filled the space between the fleets, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The ancient ships didn't dodge. Their shields activated automatically, fields of bent spacetime that made the Devourer weapons slide off harmlessly. A few shots got through, but they splashed against the black hulls like rain on stone. "Return fire," Lisa ordered. Kyle's dreadnought spoke through his mind, asking permission, and he gave it. The main cannons fired, and space itself seemed to tear. The beam wasn't energy or matter, but something else. Something that reached out and crushed 3 Devourer ships into nothing. They didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, collapsed into impossibly small points and gone. "Direct hit," someone shouted over the radio. 3 enemy ships destroyed. Around Kyle, other ancient ships opened fire. The fighters wove through devourer formations, their weapons cutting through enemy hulls like paper. The cruisers laid down devastating barrages that cleared entire sections of space, and the other dreadnoughts, 5 massive vessels piloted by humans who were barely keeping control, fired again and again, each shot ending multiple enemy ships. But the devourers had numbers. For every ship the humans destroyed, 2 more moved to take its place. They adapted quickly, focusing their fire on individual ancient ships, trying to overwhelm the shields through sheer volume. One of the human-piloted cruisers took too many hits, its shields flickering and failing. Devourer boarding vessels attached to its hull like parasites. "This is the Striker, we're being boarded." The pilot's voice screamed over the radio. "They're cutting through the hull!" Lisa watched helplessly from the command center. The cruiser was too far away for anyone to help. She was about to order them to abandon ship when something unexpected happened. The ancient ship's AI took over. Internal defenses activated throughout the vessel, weapons that had been dormant for millennia coming online. Lisa heard the screams of devourers dying through the radio as the ship defended itself, its corridors becoming death traps for the boarders. Within minutes, the threat was eliminated. The ship fought back on its own, the Striker's pilot reported, his voice shaking with awe. "It protected us. These ships really are alive," the battle raged on. Humans learned to fight in ways they had never imagined, their minds linked to weapons that responded to thought and will. Kyle discovered he could fire multiple weapon systems simultaneously, his consciousness splitting across different targeting solutions. Other pilots found they could coordinate with nearby ships through the ancient network, sharing targeting data and tactics at the speed of thought. But they were still outnumbered, and the devourers were relentless. More enemy ships kept arriving, reinforcements jumping into the system despite the losses. Lisa watched the tactical display and did the math. At this rate, they would be overwhelmed in less than an hour. "Greg, what's the status on the Dyson Sphere's weapons?" "Almost ready, Captain. But you need to understand, when we fire this thing, there's no predicting all the effects. We could win the battle and tear apart local space-time in the process. Do we have a choice?" Greg looked at her, and in his eyes Lisa saw the same terrible knowledge. Sometimes there was no good option. Sometimes you had to choose between bad and worse and pray you chose right. "Fire when ready," Lisa said quietly. Greg's hands moved across the control surface, and the Dyson sphere responded. All across its vast surface, panels opened to reveal weapon systems that dwarfed anything on the ships. Energy began to build, drawn from the singularity at the sphere's heart, more power than should exist in one place. The Devourers sensed something changing. Their fleet began to pull back, trying to create distance. But they were too late. The Dyson sphere fired. It wasn't a beam or a projectile. It was a wave, a ripple in space-time itself that expanded outward in all directions. Where it passed, Devourer ships simply fell apart, their atomic bonds unable to withstand the gravitational stress. Shields meant nothing. Armor meant nothing. Over 100 enemy vessels disintegrated in seconds, reduced to component atoms. The remaining Devourers broke formation and ran. They jumped away in every direction, abandoning the battle in a panic that Lisa had never seen from them before. Within minutes, the space around Epsilon 9 was clear of enemies. Silence fell across the fleet. Then someone started cheering, and the cheer spread to every ship. They had done it. Against impossible odds, with weapons they barely understood, humanity had won its first reel. The emergency meeting in the Dyson Sphere's command center lasted 3 hours, and every minute felt like borrowed time. Captain Lisa Hayes stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces around her. Lieutenant Ben Carter, exhausted from the battle. Greg Palmer, his gray hair wild and his eyes red from lack of sleep. Major Kyle Brooks, still wearing his flight suit. And on the display screens, the faces of Earth Command. Admiral Harris looking older and more tired than Lisa had ever seen him. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Harris said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You engaged the enemy with ancient weapons, won the battle, but in doing so destabilized the power source for the entire Dyson sphere. And now you're telling me that every devourer in the sector knows where you are?" "That's correct, sir," Lisa replied, keeping her voice level. The energy signature from the sphere's weapons was impossible to hide. "We estimate the devourers will return with their main fleet within 72 hours. "How many ships?" Greg pulled up intelligence reports on the secondary display. Based on coalition reconnaissance, the Devourers can field approximately 10,000 vessels when they commit to a major assault. If they bring everything, we'll be facing the largest enemy concentration in the war. The room fell silent. 10,000 ships. Even with the Black Armada, the numbers were overwhelming. Harris rubbed his face with both hands. What about the coalition? Can we call for reinforcements? We could, Lisa said slowly. But there's a problem. The moment we reveal the Black Armada to the coalition, this becomes a political disaster. 47 species will demand access to ancient technology. There will be fighting, maybe even civil war over who gets what. The coalition could tear itself apart before we ever face the Devourers again. Then we keep it secret, Harris decided, at least until we understand what we're dealing with. Captain, I'm authorizing you to use whatever resources you need, but you have to hold that position until we can evacuate the ancient technology. We cannot let the Devourers claim it. After the meeting ended, Lisa walked through the corridors of the Dyson sphere, trying to clear her head. The structure was impossibly vast, with sections that extended for miles in every direction. Everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of the ancients' advanced civilization, technology that made human science look like children playing with sticks. She found Greg in what appeared to be a library, surrounded by holographic displays showing ancient text. He looked up as she entered, and she could see the weight of knowledge in his eyes. I've been reading their records, Greg said without preamble. The ancients left detailed logs about why they abandoned the Black Armada. Captain, they discovered something terrible about the nature of war itself. Lisa pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. Tell me. The ancients fought a war against an enemy they called the Consumers. From what I can translate, the Consumers sound exactly like the Devourers, creatures of living metal that fed on civilizations. The ancients built the Black Armada to fight them, and they won. They destroyed the Consumers completely, but in doing so, they learned a terrible truth. Greg pulled up an image, a diagram showing complex energy flows. The Black Armada's weapons draw power from dimensional rifts, gaps between our reality and others. The ancients discovered that these rifts are connected to the Consumers themselves. The Devourers aren't from our universe. They're from somewhere else, drawn here by the very weapons we use to fight them. Every time we fire these guns, we make the gateway wider. We call them here. Lisa felt ice form in her stomach. Are you saying that by using the Black Armada, we're making the Devourers stronger? Worse than that. The ancients realized that the Consumers they fought were just the first wave. Using the weapons called more and more of them through the rifts. The ancients won their war, but only by making the problem infinitely worse for whoever came after. That's why they sealed the Armada and left. They transcended physical reality to escape the consequences of what they had done. And we just used those same weapons, Lisa said quietly. We called the Devourers here. Yes, and if we keep fighting with the Black Armada, we'll draw even more of them. Eventually, our entire galaxy will be overrun. The ancients tried to warn us, but we didn't understand until it was too late. Lisa stood and walked to the window, looking out at the thousands of ships floating in perfect formation. All that power, and it was worse than useless. It was poison. There has to be another way. There is. Ben's voice came from the doorway. The young engineer stepped into the library, carrying a data pad. I've been studying the ancient power systems, trying to figure out how to stabilize the singularity. I think I found something. He pulled up his data on the holographic display. The Dyson sphere's weapons draw power from dimensional rifts, right? But the sphere itself contains the singularity, keeps it stable. What if we reverse the process? Instead of drawing power out through rifts, we push it back. We use the singularity as a bomb, but a very specific kind of bomb. One that closes the rifts instead of opening them. Greg leaned forward, studying the equations. That could work. If we overload the singularity at the exact moment we're under attack, the resulting explosion would collapse the local dimensional boundaries. It would seal the gateway the Devourers use to enter our reality. And kill everyone here in the process, Lisa finished. You're talking about a suicide mission? Yes, Ben said simply. But it would work. We could end the Devourer threat permanently. No more invasions, no more consumed worlds. The rifts would be sealed, and whatever's on the other side stays there forever. Lisa looked at both men, seeing in their faces the same terrible determination. They knew what they were proposing. They knew the cost, and they were willing to pay it. I need to think, Lisa said. Give me an hour. She walked for a long time through the empty corridors past weapons that could destroy worlds and ships that could fight fleets. All this power, all this technology, and it meant nothing if using it doomed everyone. Her communication device buzzed. A message from Colonel Amy Wright, still fighting the evacuation on Tarsus Prime. The Devourers broke through our lines. We're pulling everyone back to the final evacuation zone. Maybe 3,000 people left to save. I wanted you to know in case this is the last message. You find that Armada, Captain. You make it count. Lisa closed her eyes. 3,000 people. That was just one planet, one battle. Across the galaxy, billions more waited for salvation that might never come, unless someone was willing to make the hard choice. She returned to the command center to find her senior staff already assembled. They knew her well enough to read her face. We're going to do it, Lisa said. We're going to turn the Dyson sphere into a weapon, not to fight the Devourers, but to seal them out forever. But I won't order anyone to stay. Anyone who wants to leave, you have my permission. Take a ship and go. No one will think less of you. Silence filled the room. Then Major Kyle Brooks stood up. I'm staying. I've fought these things for 2 years. If we can end this, I want to be part of it. Me too, Ben said. And me, Greg added. One by one, every person in the room stood, not because they wanted to die, but because they understood that some things were worth dying for. Then we have work to do, Lisa said, blinking back tears she refused to shed. Ben, start preparing the singularity for overload. Greg, work with him on the timing. It has to be perfect. Kyle, I need you to organize the fleet. When the Devourers come, we need to make them commit everything. Draw them in close before we blow. Over the next 60 hours, humanity prepared for its final stand. They positioned the Black Armada around the Dyson sphere in defensive formations, making it look like they were planning to hold the position. In reality, they were bait for the biggest trap ever built. Messages went out to Earth Command explaining what they planned to do. Admiral Harris argued for 2 hours trying to find another way. But in the end, he understood. Sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. Lisa sent personal messages to her sister, to friends she would never see again. She kept them short because there was nothing to say that would make this easier. She was going to die for a good reason, and that would have to be enough. The Devourers arrived exactly 71 hours after the first battle. They came in a swarm that blocked out the stars, 10,000 ships moving in perfect coordination. This was their main fleet, everything they had gathered over decades of conquest. They had come to claim the Black Armada, and they brought enough force to overwhelm any defense. All ships, battle stations, Lisa ordered from the command center. Around her, humans moved to their posts with quiet determination. No one was afraid anymore. Fear required a future, and they had already given theirs away. The ancient ships launched from the Dyson sphere, 53 vessels against 10,000. The human pilots knew they couldn't win this fight, but they could make the enemy work for it. They spread out in attack formations, drawing the Devourers deeper into the kill zone. Major Kyle Brooks led the charge in his dreadnought, the massive ship moving with impossible grace through the enemy formations. He fired his weapons carefully, killing enough Devourers to make them angry but not enough to make them retreat. He needed them to commit, to bring their entire fleet into range of the Dyson sphere.